There are some shows that just stick with you. They kind of define a whole era of adventure. And for a whole generation of sci-fi fans, that show was absolutely Buck Rogers in the 25th century. So today, we're going to celebrate its incredible legacy and the star who brought that hero to life.
Now, our journey back to the 25th century is prompted by some really sad news. We recently lost the man who was Captain Buck Rogers, Gil Gerard. He was a true fixture of late 70s and early 80s TV, and his passing, well, it really marks the end of an era for so many of us.
Yeah, he was 82 years old. His wife, Janet, shared that he'd been fighting what she called a rare and viciously aggressive form of cancer. It's a huge loss, and honestly, it gives us the perfect reason to look back and really celebrate the role that made him such an icon.
So let's talk about the show itself. Because what's so fascinating is that for a lot of us, discovering Buck Rogers wasn't some big primetime event. Its journey to becoming a classic is really a story about finding the right audience at exactly the right time.
Okay, so the whole premise was just pure sci-fi gold. You had Gil Gerard at Captain Buck Rogers, a 20th century astronaut who gets frozen in space for 500 years. He wakes up in the future alongside the amazing Colonel Wilma Deering, played by Erin Gray, and of course the unforgettable robot sidekick, Twiki, voiced by the one and only Mel Blanc. I mean, you can still hear that biddity-bitty-bitty in your head, can't you? And believe it or not, this all started with a comic strip from way back in 1929. But here's the thing about how this show really found its people. During its original run on NBC, it was kind of buried. It was going up against monster hits like Mork and Mindy. But then, in syndication, it found this whole new life as a daily 6 p.m. after-school adventure. And that's where it really took off and just captured the imagination of a generation.
And the show wasn't just about the main cast, not by a long shot. The list of guest stars was just unbelievable. We're talking everyone from Jamie Lee Curtis and Jack Palance to TV favorites like Gary Coleman. They even brought in classic Batman villains like Frank Gorshin and Julie Newmar. A lineup like that just goes to show you the kind of cultural pull this series had.
So where did this slick, action-packed vision of the future even come from? Well, if it felt a little familiar, kind of like another huge sci-fi show from that era, there's a very good reason for that. Turns out, they were practically siblings.
And the connection is the legendary producer Glenn A. Larson. He was the creative powerhouse behind both Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers. Galactica came out just a year before Buck, which meant that Buck Rogers got to reuse props and special effects footage from its older sibling. It was a really smart way to build a whole second sci-fi universe on a TV budget.
Okay, now we get to my absolute favorite part of this whole story. Tucked away in one single episode is one of the cleverest, most meta moments in all of sci-fi television history. A moment that was a total reward for fans who knew their stuff.
It all centers on this simple but surprisingly tricky question. When two heroes meet, who is actually the older one? And as you'll see, the answer really depends on how you look at it.
So the guest star for this episode was an actor named Buster Crabbe. Now, for those who don't know, Buster Crabbe was the original screen Buck Rogers from the 1939 movie serial. And in this episode, his character's name was Brigadier Gordon, which was this awesome little nod to the other famous sci-fi hero he played, Flash Gordon. To really get the joke, you need a little history. See, Buck Rogers was the first comic strip hero starting in 1929. Flash Gordon was created a few years later as a direct competitor. But Flash actually beat Buck to the movies, getting a serial in 1936. So Buster Crabbe had already played Flash before he ever played Buck. This friendly rivalry was already decades old at this point. So in the episode, the two of them have this friendly argument about who's older. Gil Gerard's Buck is all smug about it, right? He knows he's technically over 500 years old from being frozen. But Buster Crabbe's character, this old veteran pilot, he just kind of smiles because he knows a secret that the audience is in on. And that's the punchline. It's this brilliant wink to the audience. See, in the world of the show, yeah, Gerard's Buck was older. But in our world, Buster Crabbe was the original Buck Rogers. In real life, he was the older hero. It's just a fantastic, layered piece of TV writing. Now, given how memorable the show is, you would think it ran for years and years, right? But its actual flight was surprisingly short, which leads to a really interesting puzzle about how we all remember it so well. 37. That's it. That's the number.
In total, only 37 episodes of Buck Rogers in the 25th Century were ever made. It only made it to a shortened second season before the network pulled the plug.
So this raises a huge question, especially for anyone who remembers watching it every single day after school. How on earth do you run a daily show with only 37 episodes? I mean, you'd burn through the entire series in just over 7 weeks.
Well, the most likely answer was this really clever syndication package deal. A local station would run all 37 episodes of Buck Rogers. Then, in that exact same 6 p.m. time slot, its sibling show, Battlestar Galactica, would take over. And once that run was finished, Buck would be back. It was a genius way to keep two beloved but short-lived sci-fi shows constantly on the air.
So Buck's primetime flight may have been brief, but its impact was absolutely massive. It was that perfect mix of late 70s style, Gil Gerard's undeniable charm, and just pure sci-fi action that really cemented its place in pop culture. It proved that a show didn't need a long run to become a true icon.
You know, it really leaves you with a final thought. In an age where we have these 100-episode streaming monsters, what is it that gives a short-lived show like this such a lasting legacy? Was it the timing, the star, or was it just the pure, unadulterated fun? Whatever the reason, the flight of Buck Rogers is one we are definitely not going to forget anytime soon. Thanks for exploring it with me.